I wanted a simple life, but fate had something else in store for me. And the ending of this story proves that sometimes we have no control over anything. I'd spent most of the morning dragging boxes across concrete, sweat sticking my shirt to my back. The new workshop was finally mine. 2 decades of waiting, 3 years of slow savings, and now I had a place of my own, cluttered with potential and the smell of sawdust and rust. The floor was uneven and the roof had a suspicious sag, but I saw beauty in it, a place to fix what could be fixed. I was halfway through labeling the drawers when I realized something strange. The small envelope where I kept my passport, wedged between utility bills and my union paperwork, was gone. At first I assumed I'd left it behind in the chaos of moving, but by evening, after checking every drawer, toolbox, and folder, I knew it wasn't a mistake. When I asked Laura, she didn't even blink, said she had put the documents in the safe, even though that safe had only ever had my prints on it. We never used it much, too much hassle to unlock for everyday things. But now she was volunteering to use it. My stomach folded in on itself, but I nodded like it was nothing. That same night, trying to find space for our winter coats, I opened one of the boxes she'd packed from the top closet shelf. Nestled between scarves and old mittens, wrapped carelessly in a crinkled sweater, were 2 glossy cruise tickets. Laura's name was on one. The second? Not mine. A name I didn't recognize. The dates matched the exact week I was supposed to be away for a job in Nashville. That trip had been postponed last minute because of supply delays. Something I hadn't told her yet. When I asked calmly, she didn't even hesitate, said it was a marketing giveaway, just something dumb from a real estate raffle that she forgot to cancel. Her voice was light, almost annoyed I'd brought it up. I didn't push. I said nothing. And the next morning, I quietly canceled my trip. Told work there'd been a family shift. I stayed home with the kids that week. Laura left, saying she was visiting her mom out of town. Needed space to reset, she claimed, reconnect with herself. She didn't know I already knew where she'd be reconnecting. She came back 5 days later with a tan that wasn't just from sunshine. She looked lighter. She kissed the kids with extra energy and dropped souvenirs onto the kitchen table like nothing had happened. I watched her hand each one their gifts, a shell bracelet for Molly, a handheld puzzle game for Noah. The same game he'd asked her for a week earlier, in a letter I'd watched him fold and put into the side pocket of her purse before she left. She hadn't responded to that letter, had said she never saw it, but clearly she had. That night, while the kids watched a movie in the den, I walked into the backyard with a flashlight and a small spade. Beneath the swing set, behind the tool shed, there was a box I hadn't touched in years, wrapped in plastic, sealed with duct tape, my old dream board. I brushed the dirt off the lid and opened it there on the grass. It was childish. Cutouts from magazines, photos of boats, cabins, wild places I'd never been. But it reminded me of who I used to be before all of this, before the debts, the long nights, the sideways glances. I stood there for a long time, holding that folded picture of a cabin beside a frozen lake. Something cracked open in me, not from rage, from clarity. If I wanted to rebuild, I had to start without her. The next few weekends, I threw myself into the project that had been calling me for years. The boat. She was a mess when I found her, tilted sideways behind a neighbor's shed, barnacles and weeds growing from her cracked hull. But I loved her. I bought her for next to nothing, and every Saturday I brought the kids with me to fix her. Molly learned how to change a fuel filter. Noah figured out the wiring on the radio like he'd been born for it. We laughed more in those moments than we had in months. It felt real again. Honest. Then one afternoon, Laura stopped by with a cardboard box. Said she was clearing space. I opened the lid later that night. Inside were the kinds of things you only give back when you've already left for good. My old letters, yellowed at the edges, photos from our road trips, and the pendant I'd given her back in 2010, the one with the tiny silver compass etched on the back. She once said it helped her feel less lost. Now apparently it didn't matter. I went through the box with the kids, explaining each photo, letting them ask whatever they wanted. And that's when I saw it. A photo from a vacation she said she took alone 4 years ago. She'd said she needed space after a miscarriage. I'd stayed behind with the kids while she healed. But in the mirror behind her, in the reflection of that perfectly polished hotel wall, was the figure of a man, holding a drink, his posture too familiar to be a stranger. My throat closed. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. That same week, by some cruel coincidence, I bumped into an old friend who used to work at the clinic where she'd said she'd been treated. The woman didn't hesitate, said Laura had come in for one appointment and never returned. No follow-ups, no prescriptions, just vanished. I nodded, kept my hands in my pockets, and walked away. That night, after tucking the kids in, I went down to the boat. The stars were out, the sky low and heavy. I set her adrift from the dock, let the motor hum quietly as I drifted out into the deeper part of the river. I sat there for hours, hands on the wheel but going nowhere. I wrote a letter under the glow of the old cabin light. Every word I wanted to say, but I didn't send it. I folded it, slipped it into the toolbox under the seat, and decided, when I've built something real with these hands, not just fixed things, but made something new, only then will I speak. Only then will I decide what happens next. Spring crept in slowly that year, warm but unsure, like it didn't quite trust the ground yet. The river had thawed enough that the boats started making short trips, sometimes just me and the motor. Other times, the kids came along. They started calling her the second wind, a name Noah came up with while eating dry cereal from the front seat. I never corrected him, even when he spelled it wrong on the side in blue paint. It felt right. I let the letters stay crooked. Every Saturday, we loaded the trunk with sandwiches, tools, extra oil, and just went. Sometimes we fixed parts of the engine. Sometimes we just floated and talked. Molly started bringing a little journal, sketching whatever caught her eye. Driftwood, a cloud shaped like a sleeping dog, once a pair of ospreys nesting high in a metal tower. They were small things, but they began to matter more than anything else. I didn't need words from her mother anymore. I didn't even expect them. But Laura still showed up, mostly to keep up appearances. A Sunday drop-off, a forced conversation in the driveway. Then one Thursday afternoon, she texted saying she had a few things of mine in storage. I told her to leave the box by the garage. I didn't want to see her. When I got home from work, the box was there, taped but not sealed. Inside were items too familiar. My watch, the copy of a book we used to read on road trips, but something about how it was packed, too deliberate, made me uneasy. That night after dinner, I opened the box again with the kids. It became a ritual now, finding these leftovers from a life that no longer fit. Molly pulled out an envelope stuffed with photos. She was flipping through when she stopped, turned one toward me and asked, "Who's that man in the mirror?" I took the photo. It was one of those cliché beach shots. Laura in a red bikini, standing in front of a window with the sea behind her. But just off to the side, caught in the reflection, was the figure of a man's hand resting on her hip. You wouldn't notice it unless you were looking for it, but I was always looking now. I remembered that bikini. She bought it in secret and told me it was for a surprise weekend we never ended up taking. Now I knew where she wore it. That wasn't our hotel. That wasn't our trip. I didn't say a word to the kids. I just slid the photo back into the envelope and moved on. But inside, a cold certainty settled. There had never been just one lie. That weekend, I took them back to the docks, but we didn't sail. We stayed anchored and cleaned the cabin. Molly helped polish the brass rails while Noah organized the tackle box. As I was lifting a toolbox under the bench seat, my hand brushed against something folded. Not the letter I had written weeks ago. Something else. A brochure. A hotel in Portland, glossy and smiling, with a red circle drawn around the balcony suite. I recognized the handwriting in the margin. Hers. Booked for the 17th. The year was 3 years ago. I'd been on the road back then, long-haul deliveries for nearly a week straight. I flipped it over. On the back was a note, short, like a reminder to herself. Jack will meet me at 4 p.m. Bring that red dress. I didn't know a Jack, at least not yet, but the name burned into my chest. 3 days later, I got a message. Random, unexpected. It came from a number I didn't recognize until I saw the name attached. Jack Monroe. We hadn't spoken since our mid-20s. He was a decent guy, mostly quiet, worked in real estate out west. His message was short but heavy. I didn't know. I'm sorry, man. She told me she was divorced. At first, I didn't understand. Then I scrolled down. He had attached a photo, her, on a boardwalk, holding his hand, wearing the same red swimsuit. My head went quiet, not angry, just silent in a way I'd never felt before. Jack must have found out later, pieced it together and reached out. He even mentioned Portland, said she told him her name was Marie, that she was starting over. That night I asked her a question, casual. Hey, did we ever go to Portland? She didn't blink. Said, sure, remember that rainy weekend? I didn't, because it never happened. I just nodded and went on washing dishes. She didn't notice my silence had changed shape. The next morning I left an envelope on the bed. Inside was a printout of the photo Jack had sent, and beside it, the spare car keys. I didn't write a note. No need. I knew she'd understand what it meant. I drove out to my grandfather's old ranch, land that had been empty for years. Weeds taller than my knees. The workshop was leaning like an old man, too proud to fall over. I cut the chains, cleared out the dust, and started sweeping. By noon, I had a fire going in the old stove and a mattress on the floor. The walls were covered in my childhood sketches, still faint behind the peeling paint. That night, with only the wind outside, I fell asleep to the sound of floorboards settling like old bones. Each morning after, I restored something small. A pulley system, a broken clamp, the rusted vise on the bench. Tools came back to life like they'd been waiting, and with every bolt I tightened, I felt something inside me begin to align again. I didn't need to fix what we had. I didn't even want to understand it anymore. All I knew was that life, my life, had to be built from this moment forward, not backward, and it would never include secrets. Not in the boat, not in the ranch, not with the kids. I hadn't told them about the ranch yet. I wanted it to be a surprise, a place that belonged only to us. No ghosts, just soil, wind, and the smell of wood returning to purpose. I'd decided, when the walls were standing again, when the door didn't creak, then we'd start calling it home. And maybe someday I'd tell them the whole truth, not out of bitterness, but so they'd understand how to build with both hands open, never one behind your back. The roof groaned every time the wind shifted, like the old workshop was still deciding if it wanted to stay upright. I had reinforced the southern beam with a jack post I found buried behind the barn, rusted through but willing. That's how most of it went. Nothing new, just broken things made strong again. The floor didn't creak anymore, and the dust no longer rose in clouds. The smell of oil, iron, and pine slowly replaced the silence that had lived there too long. I told the kids about the ranch one Saturday morning over pancakes. I said it wasn't a house yet, just a place with bones and a roof. Molly asked if there were animals. Noah asked if he could build a treehouse. I said yes to both, even though the trees out there weren't much more than wind-twisted skeletons. It didn't matter. We'd find a way. They stayed with me that weekend. Laura didn't call. She rarely did anymore. There was something in her voice the last few times, like she was waiting for me to yell, to rage, to break. But I didn't. I wouldn't give her that, not because I was holding back, but because the fire had already burned through. Now there was only rebuilding. That Saturday night, the three of us slept in the workshop, curled up under old quilts with a lantern flickering beside us. The next morning, we cleared the porch and started sketching the treehouse plans in chalk on the side wall. It wasn't just about wood and nails. It was about creating something they could touch, something no one could take away. 2 days later, I got an envelope in the mail with no return address. Inside was a single photo and a folded piece of paper. The photo showed Laura and the same man I'd seen in the vacation mirror. But now there was no reflection. They were standing side by side, laughing, holding drinks at some sort of all-inclusive resort. It was dated 6 years ago, around the time she said she was dealing with postpartum depression. I'd been working double shifts then, driving forklifts at night and picking up carpentry gigs during the day. I remembered holding her at 3 a.m. as she cried, saying the world felt too heavy. She hadn't been crushed by grief. She'd just been elsewhere. The paper was a printout of a message thread. Half a dozen screenshots between her and the man, full of casual intimacy, nicknames, plans to do it again next spring. One message made my hands go still. He has no idea. He's too busy being everyone's hero. It wasn't the cheating that stunned me. It was the ease, the confidence, the way she described me like a background character in her life. I folded the paper slowly, placed it back into the envelope, and slid it into the back of the drawer where I kept old keys and broken locks. I didn't need to confront her. I didn't want an apology. I didn't even want an explanation anymore. What I wanted was space enough to keep building something true. That week I picked up lumber from a nearby salvage yard. Noah helped me measure the beams. Molly painted the treehouse floor in a patchwork of blues and greens. By Friday, the platform was standing, tied between two half-dead oaks, reinforced with more steel than was probably necessary. It was crooked. It was perfect. On Sunday, we had our first night there, just the three of us again. I brought hot chocolate in a thermos and a small lantern that swung gently in the wind. They asked if we could sleep up there next time. I told them, sure, once we bring a bug net. The following Monday, I got a message I didn't expect. It was from my lawyer, not about the divorce, which was crawling along as expected, but about a lien Laura had apparently placed on my workshop property 2 years ago. I hadn't known. She'd done it while we were still working on us, during therapy sessions she'd insisted on. It had been part of a joint account filing, buried in fine print. I stared at the document for an hour, her name next to mine, on something I had built alone, something she had never touched. I called the lawyer. He was calm, said it could be reversed, that I just need to prove full ownership, which I could, easily, but it wasn't the paperwork that left me shaking. It was what it revealed. Even back then, even while she sat across from me saying, let's try again, she'd been carving off a piece for herself, preparing a parachute. I was never her partner, just her launch pad. I didn't tell the kids. I wouldn't drag them through that. Instead, I poured that fury into the ranch. I rebuilt the windows, tore out the rot in the back wall, sanded the workbenches until they felt like new wood. Each task carved the noise out of my mind. The night after I filed the reversal paperwork, I found myself sitting outside with the kids again, this time beside the fire pit. Molly was teaching Noah how to braid a rope into a swing. He messed up the strands and she laughed. I watched them, and for a second I wasn't thinking about her. I was just here. That moment was interrupted by headlights. Laura's car pulled up slowly along the dirt path. She didn't get out right away, just sat there, engine off, watching. When she finally stepped out, she was holding a bag, something that looked like a care package. For the kids, she said, not looking at me. Molly took it politely. Noah said thanks. Laura lingered, standing on the edge of the light. You've changed, she said quietly. I didn't answer. What was there to say? She looked at the house behind us, half lit, wood stacked neatly, tools lined up. You really fixed it up. I nodded. She waited, then added, do you still have that letter? I didn't ask which one. I knew. I said, no. I've said everything I need to say. She left after that. But the next morning I found the envelope again. Not the one from the man, not the screenshots. The one I'd written that night on the boat. The one I never sent. It was still in the toolbox, buried under socket wrenches and a backup spark plug. I didn't open it. I didn't need to read the words again, because everything I wanted to say had already started to take shape in wood, rope, and firelight. And my kids were already learning a different kind of truth. Not about what was broken, but about what could still be made whole. The ranch didn't feel empty anymore. The windows let in more than light now. They brought breath, purpose, and voices that filled the cracks between the walls. I had fixed everything I could with my hands, and the rest I had simply let be. Some things weren't worth mending, and some silences spoke louder than anything I could have said out loud. The treehouse was done. Noah hung a little wooden sign from the top beam. It read, Base Camp, carved with a pocket knife and filled in with crayon. Molly added stars along the side using leftover glow paint, and at night they'd sit up there pretending they were deep in the mountains, far from anything or anyone. Sometimes I sat nearby, just listening. That sound, their laughter, was the only thing I ever wanted to protect. One Saturday morning, I got a letter in the mail. Official, from the court. The divorce had been finalized. No disputes, no drawn-out battles. Laura didn't contest anything. She had even signed away her claim to the ranch without comment. I guess she realized I was already gone long before the papers came. I folded the notice and slipped it in the drawer beneath the coffee tins. Not out of sentiment, just because it no longer mattered enough to display. She'd moved into a new apartment across town months ago. We barely exchanged more than a handful of words now, mostly scheduling pickups and drop-offs. The kids never asked about her absence, not anymore. Then one Thursday evening, Molly came to me with a drawing. It was of our family, not how it used to be, but how it was now. Just the three of us. She'd drawn the ranch in the background, the boat, the treehouse, even the stars on the roofline. But where Laura should have been, there was nothing, just sky. I asked if she'd forgotten to finish it. She shook her head. I didn't know where to put her, she said, and that was it. I didn't press. I didn't need to. That weekend, I decided it was time. I had planned something for a while, a trip not too far, but far enough that it would leave the old roads behind. We packed the car with gear, loaded the boat on the trailer, and hit the road at dawn. No phones, no signals. Just us in a stretch of wilderness where the water was so still it looked like glass until the motor rippled through. We set up camp on a small inlet where the trees leaned low and the birds moved like whispers. That night we built a fire on the beach. I told them stories from when I was young, ones I'd never shared before, about my father's laugh, about the time I broke my leg falling off a barn roof, about how scared I was when Molly was born, and how I held her like she might dissolve if I breathed wrong. They listened, eyes wide, mouths quiet. It was the first time I let them see past the man who'd held everything together. And then Noah asked, "Is this ours now?" I looked at him, at the flicker of the fire in his eyes, at Molly's hand wrapped around a stick of bread she was toasting over the flames. I said, "Yes, all of it." We slept under the stars that night, no tents, just blankets and sky. The moon lit the water pale silver, and I stayed awake longer than I needed to, watching them sleep. In my coat pocket was a letter, not the one I wrote on the boat all those weeks ago. That one I had finally burned, quietly in the ranch fireplace after the court documents came in. I didn't read it, didn't need to. It had done its job without ever being opened. This new letter was different. This one was for Laura. Not words of hate, not accusations, just a simple explanation. We're not coming back. Not to that house, not to the version of life you wanted me to believe in. I'm not angry, I'm just done pretending. I never sent it. Instead, when we got home the next day, I drove out past her apartment, parked in front of the building, and waited. She came out with someone else, a man taller than me, gray in the beard, wearing a shirt I recognized. I didn't flinch, didn't look away. She saw me, paused, then looked down. Maybe out of guilt, maybe not. I couldn't tell anymore. I reached into the glove box, took out the envelope, and, for a moment, thought about stepping out, walking over, handing it to her. Instead, I put it on the seat beside me and drove away. That night, I sat on the porch of the ranch while the kids slept inside. The crickets were louder than usual, the stars like thumbtacks pressed into the sky. I looked around, at the treehouse, at the old truck parked under the makeshift awning, at the fire pit still smoldering from dinner. And I understood something I hadn't before. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need closure. She hadn't just betrayed me. She'd freed me. Everything I was building now wasn't because of what she did. It was because of what I refused to let it take from me. My voice, my purpose, my children's trust. I took the envelope from the seat, opened it, tore the letter in half, and fed it into the fire. Let her have her life. Let her explain herself to someone else. We had our own world now. Crooked, hand-built, and honest. And we were never going back. That's all for now, folks. Thank you for being with me today and listened. And if you liked my story, please subscribe, hit the like button, and comment below what you think about all this, and what would you do if you were me. Also, don't forget to check my other stories in description below.